When we understand how a system operates, we are more capable of weaving our way through it and generating new code within it to help change the world. This is Alon, and you're about to listen to episode 93 of Paradigm Shift Radio about social alchemy to hack the matrix with our good friend and movement director, Pollack. Paradigm Shift Radio is here to help inspire you, the audience, to be the change you wish to see in the world via exciting, creative, and fun ways to bring more love into it. In this episode, we talked about the potency of something as simple as free hug tactics, how it is creating a space for agreement and opportunity between people that is fostering the expression and growth of consciousness itself. We talk about what alchemy means and how social alchemy can be interpreted and practiced by anyone, anywhere. We are also joined on this episode by our friends from Israel who are beginning their love trip adventure to partake in social alchemy across Canada. Our co-host Paradox has plenty of first-hand experience with creating space and art to help inspire people and had plenty to add to the conversation. Check out more of his work at paradoxpollack.com. Hacking the matrix is something all of us can do. All it takes is a bit of courage and knowing that the potential is already within our favor. So stay tuned in for future episodes of Paradigm Shift Radio and even add your voice to the story about how all of us are helping change the world. Spark some social alchemy on your own, and even simply by telling your friends about PSR and inviting them to get involved too. Help build the tribe where you are, and remember, we are already connected to those around us before we meet them in a non-linear sense. All we have to do is meet the universe halfway. And of course, a reminder to check out the Paradigm Shift buttons and shirts through the main website, tools we provide to help you use to evoke synchronicity, plant seeds, and engage in social alchemy where you are. So be inspired, be involved, go hack the matrix, and enjoy the flow. Greetings once again, international friends, wherever you are, whenever you are. Thank you once again for tuning in to another consciousness-shifting, mind-expanding, inspirational episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. This is your good buddy, Brendon, a.k.a. Skull Babylon, Rebirth from Within, joining you once again for, tonight's episode. Going to be talking about social alchemy and hacking the matrix. Hacking the matrix is one of my favorite topics, something that I'm personally involved with, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about what that means, what it means to be able to change the system, what it means to sort of weave our way through it, to surf the web of reality itself, and to be able to connect ourselves with the other people out there who are on that same wavelength, who they themselves are being the change that they wish to see in the world. So, of course, shout out to our 18 users in the live chat right now, which is always a fraction of the amount of people who are actually tuned in. So, of course, if you're listening to the show, feel free to join the live chat. So if you're listening in through Blog Talk, just scroll down a bit and be able to connect through that way. And of course, if I can just get an 1111 from somebody in the live chat, just confirm that you guys can hear me A-okay, then we'll be able to get moving along with things. And I do just want to give a little bit of introduction just in terms of what I've been up to, and of course the wonderful guests who we have on the show tonight, Paradox Pollack, and how our paths cross, and just how grateful I am to be able to have him here tonight. So basically, today, what I was up to today was really awesome. I was downtown with some buddies, some very special buddies, doing some free hugs, and these buddies in particular were our good buddies Alon and Avi, who you guys have probably heard something about if you've been tuned into Paradigm Shift Radio for quite some time now. And Paradigm Shift Radio, what the radio show is, it is a media branch of the bigger project of Paradigm Shift Central, ParadigmShiftCentral.com, of course, the main website, which is a hub for a global network of Paradigm Shift communities, actively encouraging open-mindedness, healthy living, and the evolution of consciousness. So coming here once a week, it's just part of what we do to be able to get a bit of a sync, get a bit of a flow, check in with each other, to be able to help keep each other inspired, to keep that momentum, to hold each other in a state of integrity, and to be able to share what stories are unfolding. Well, one of the recent stories that is unfolding, literally happened today, is that Alon and Avi, they started a Paradigm Shift community in Israel. So there's communities all across the world. I myself am in London, Ontario, Canada, and they saw some videos that I did a long time ago on YouTube doing free hugs and doing shiftivism, as I call it, downtown, which in itself is social alchemy, which is what this episode is about. So doing things like free hugs, doing things that are going to just sort of make people question what is it that encourages someone to want to be able to give free hugs downtown, and then to give them that opportunity to meet you halfway and to be able to say, like, yes, this is awesome, like, I see you, you know, like, that's really what it's about. Like, through this hugging, it's sort of just it brings people into this realization of oneness, which of course is really what this show is constantly here to remind us, that we're all constantly here to remind us about, is this oneness, is this unity, is this awakening of consciousness, and the potential that we have within this reality to create. So, long story short, the reason what I'm telling you is that we may be having Alon and Avi on the show tonight, which, if all things go well, that will be part of the plan as well as Paradox. And Alon and Avi, they were so inspired that they traveled to Canada to begin this project that they're doing called the Love Trip. And the Love Trip is them starting in London, Ontario, Canada, and going east across Canada and visiting different cities and different locations all across the country and doing free hugs in these locations and just being able to connect with people as a way to be able to see what happens when we put ourselves out there, when we sort of just like go out there and just put ourselves on a street corner with a free hug sign and to be able to see what conversations come out of that. And excuse me 1 second, guys. I just got to double check. Just taking care of a technical thing right now, but it won't take more than 1 second, and I'll just whistle a quick ditty as I do it. Do. So... But anyways, yeah, so Alon and Avi, they were in London, Ontario, Canada today, and I was actually documenting it. I was actually filming a video of them, and yeah, it was really awesome, and you can expect to see a video of that. And of course, if you haven't subbed to my YouTube channel, you can do that at www.youtube.com. I just posted a link for that in the live chat, and that was really exciting. That was really cool. We started off in the park, and there's so much loving going on in the park that it took us a while to even get to a main intersection downtown. But yeah, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right, just double check with me, guys. You can still hear me. Whoa, how did that person get brought on? There we go. Okay, sorry guys, I literally just pressed the wrong button there. I don't know what just happened. So 11:11 again. If you guys can hear me, I think I fixed it real quick. Literally, I just hit the wrong button. I'm trying to multitask here. Box is with us, and so yeah, we're going to be having Alon and Avi on at some point in the show if all things go well. But who we will most definitely be having on is Paradox, who is going to be co-hosting the show with us tonight. And Paradox is a super awesome fellow, and he's actually okay. I'll just ask you to mute yourself real quick. I know you can hear me, and do an official introduction. Oh,
I'm here.
There we go. Okay, hey. All right, well, maybe we can just... All right, well, now that you're here, now that things have just sort of, yeah, we'll just roll with it. So, as I was saying, Paradox is a super awesome guy who is now with us live on the show. So, Paradox, say hello.
Hello.
and the story behind introducing Paradox and how I invited him to be a part of Paradigm Shift Radio is that, as many of you know, in the last couple of weeks, I was at the Lucidity Festival in California. I was there filming the Journey to Lucidity 2 movie. And, of course, you can check out facebook.com/Journey to Lucidity. Those of you who aren't familiar, you can watch the first movie online, currently in production of the second movie. But while I was there, there's so much awesome stuff that happens at the Lucidity Festival. You know, there's lots of workshops, there's lots of meditation, there's lots of very conscious people who are there. And Paradox was one of the people who was there, and when I was deciding where to be within the festival, when I was looking at the schedule and I was going through stuff, a couple different people from numerous different locations told me, be like, oh, you got to check out this monkey chant thing going on. There's a monkey chant that's going to be happening, and there's this guy doing it. His name's Paradox, and he's super awesome. So I'm like, monkey chant, hey, this sounds interesting. So then, amongst all the stuff that I did in Lucidity, on the first day of the actual festival, I made my way to the monkey chant. And that was when I ran into Paradox. And what the monkey chant was, it was Paradox in the center of the circle, surrounded in a very tight-knit circle of other humans, other people, and he was orchestrating us to be able to make these monkey noises. But he started doing it in such a way that they began to develop rhythm out of it. And then in multiple ways, it was just like allowing people to be able to just like let go of any inhibition that was holding them back. You know, if you were to just go up to someone and just be like, hey man, like let's make monkey noises together, they'd be like, whoa, you're crazy. But if you get enough people doing it at the same time, it's not even a big deal, and everybody's just like doing it. So that's where I met Paradox. and he is a super awesome guy. I actually did I did an interview with him for the documentary. You'll see that. And Paradox does a lot more than that. So that's how he ended up on the show, because he himself is since a young age he's been involved with some shifty stuff. I guess you could say, as we like to say here on Paradigm Shift Radio. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Paradox, who's going to be helping co-host this episode tonight as we talk about social alchemy and how to hack the Matrix. So I'll just pass it over to Paradox and give him an opportunity to introduce yourself. So Paradox, for the people listening, who are you, and tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Well, I live in Los Angeles currently. I basically, have spent, as you mentioned, my entire life really focused on how does leadership occur, and what is leadership in the current paradigm, and how do we shift the paradigm into a kind of sentiment where there is a way of sharing and collaborating in a leadership position. I started at 14. I ran away from home. I joined a theater company and really witnessed the way in which, theater is a great model for how leadership happens, because it is, in a sense, it's like you have some things that you're working with, which, is the script or the intention of the show, and then being able to, that in a sense is the kind of code that's being put out. A lot of my practices revolve around the idea of a code, and then the carrier wave of that code. And as you mentioned with the monkey chant, there's a sentiment where essentially one person is instigating the code being the ways in which we sit, the way, this kind of sounds that we make, what is the way to instigate it and have it all develop. So, from theater, I went into dance. I moved to San Francisco. I studied for a number of years all these different practices, including, Alexander technique from a master, and eventually started, asking myself, like, San Francisco, what is it? It's a circus town, and I basically, instigated circus there. I founded 2 circuses which toured the West Coast and internationally. And from there, with the skill set that I developed, I was called into film. And my first film was What Dreams May Come. My second film was I Am Legend. From I Am Legend, I got called into Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams joint. And then finally, or not finally, but last major feature that I worked on was Thor, in a really comprehensive way, and then Snow White and the Huntsman. So a lot of my work in film was, being able to apply these techniques to really the hive that film represents. And, so in this way, you get to see how there are many fronts. There are many initiatives. There's the people who build the sets. There's the people who make the props. There's the people who are responsible for the action and what actually arrives in front of the camera. And all of those people have to work together. And it's the work of, the production designer, to instigate all of the different people under them that make the props and the sets and the costumes. And then it's the director that instigates the action and how those things happen. But it's absolutely a collaboration. And, through the years that I've worked, we did a lot of street theater. We did a lot of interaction with, people who had no clue what was going on. And it occurs to me, like, one of the best examples of that I can recall was in San Francisco. We used to do a thing every year called Mud People. And the rules of Mud People were we would collect a tremendous amount of mud, and people would, kind of strip down to their most basic pieces and like underwear or just the bare minimum, and then would cover themselves in mud. And there were only 3 rules. The first rule was you couldn't move as you normally moved. You couldn't communicate in the way that you normally communicate, and we'd go from point A in the middle of San Francisco to point B. But it was, 100 people all covered in mud, basically doing this event, and the kinds of primal awareness that would come up and the interactions between the people who were mudded was incredible, and then the people who were not covered in mud and how we would reach them or bring them with us was this beautiful interface, And I think that one of the things just on this theme of hacking the system is really, there's a business as usual sentiment. And how do you take the basic principles that are in humanity? We as a species are 200,000 years old, but we only have 5,000 years of recorded history. So there's, 2.5% of what we are is documented. And the other 97.5 is what are the basic structures of how we operate that are unconscious, largely unconscious, like language is an agreement field. The ways, the behaviors that we have in general are, an agreement field that is generated by, thousands of years of evolution, of behavioral structures, of, the ways in which we come about. So it's just, for me, a lot of what I'm looking at is what are the basic elements of the code and how does the code go out, get spread. Mm-hmm. So out of all of the years of my experience, the piece that, I worked as a ringmaster, a whip-wielding ringmaster for many years, and I would do many experiments with an audience. But it wasn't until I remembered the monkey chant, because I had gone to Bali in 1990 and studied it and learned the basic form. But it wasn't until 2000 that I found a group of people who were willing to work with me and develop the technology and the learning of it into, the way that I use it now. And the reason I use it is because the sentiment is within 30 seconds to a minute of sitting down, because of the way that I've learned to play with an audience, I've been able to get all of the character armor and all of the tenets of modern society to kind of fall to the wayside and to be, pretty instantaneously being transformed. And when I realized that it was pretty much, 100% success rate, I was like, I'm going to commit to this, and I'm going to bring this to the festival community. Mm-hmm. So that was really my, my impetus and my desire to kind of make it a part of the evolving milieu of what is, what is it that we're doing while we're forming community in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, this really is, for me, so much of this is forming community. I mean, after you go through an experience such as Monkey Chant, it's very releasing. I mean, even just vocally being able to make those noises, it's not something we get to do very often. We're playing with different parts of our energy that a lot of us have very rarely sort of tapped into, sort of thing, when we actually get to do that, where we just get to, just release those noises and just, yeah, and just doing that. And we were just like, hey, this feels different. This feels good. This is tapping into a part of myself that I'm not totally familiar with. But then doing that, and when you have a group of people doing this, it gets them on the similar frequency, and it builds community. Now, just to sort of segue the conversation here, we actually do have our friends Alon and Avi on the calling into the show, and I'd like to bring them on sooner rather than later, just because they're calling in from their phone, so I don't want to have them to hold on to their phone for too long. But I'd love to just get them involved with this conversation for a bit, and just to be able to talk more about what happens, as an example, when we take our actions out onto the street, when we put out this performance onto the stage of life itself, when we bring that shift right into the heart of Babylon to be able to transform it from within. Again, like just reminding people, like the name Skull Babylon, the handle that I use, it's not just a name, it's an event. skull Babylon refers to the rebirth of Babylon, the transformation from within ourselves, and then within the system itself. It hacks the matrix, so to speak. So we're going to talk with Alon and Avi about the free hugging event that we did, about their love trip event that they have going on, and I'd love to hear Paradox's just input within this conversation as we just sort of let things continue to flow. And of course, just reminding people as we continue to get into the show, please continue to invite your friends to be able to tune in. This is some very, very like this is like we are the vanguard in a lot of ways. We are the pioneers in a lot of ways, and this is going to be the type of inspiration that will become contagious. More people will begin to do free hugs because they'll hear stories about how people such as Alon and Avi and myself and Paradox are doing our things and how it's working. Because that's the thing. It is working. When you put that energy out there, the universe will acknowledge it, and it will work with you to make it happen. And you will bring people into your path, and magic will unfold. So with that said, we're going to bring on Alon and Avi onto the show, and Oz also. I presume they're all sitting right next to each other. So with that said, we're going to bring them on and continue the conversation. So if you guys are ready, bring you on the Paradigm Shift Radio. Here we go.
Thank you.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
Can you hear us? Hey, how's it going, man? Are you guys all there?
Great. We're just lighting up the campfire.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, you guys found a camping spot. Perfect. I'm glad to hear. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, just to give a little recap for the audience, like I said, I met you guys downtown today at Victoria Park, the main park in London, and we started off doing some free hugs there. And then I was only able to stick around for a while. And last I checked, you guys were at the corner of Richmond and Dundas, downtown in London, Ontario, and you guys were there with your free hug signs, and it was going pretty good. So tell me, what else happened after I left? How did the rest of that unfold for you guys?
We just continued to do some at the same square you mentioned. It was really good, and I think that we always, like, Oz was filming from the side, and usually he does this with us. So we had the opportunity to look from the side at, like, how does it look like, and he saw that he have seen so many people who, like, stopped, and actually he saw that they thought about giving a hug, but they just needed that little push, you know. So as free huggers, as consciousness openers, and as heart openers, you know, the more we notice this kind of stuff, that we have the opportunity to invite someone to our energies, you know, they just need that, hey, you want a hug? Like this small word, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, why not, you know. And something was hacked there. Some code was hacked, you know. Something that usually happens didn't happen, and it didn't block someone just because I don't know how he looks like, or I don't know. And they gave the hug, you know. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, just to give people an idea, when I talk about this idea of like the matrix, hacking the matrix, I mean, there's quite a few ways to sort of look at this. For this case, let's just sort of talk about like there's almost the matrix as like sort of again, there's multiple ways, but there's almost like the multiple programs running within the matrix, and then one of the programs is just sort of like this standard program, which much like the movie is that program where Neo's standing there and everybody's just walking past each other, but nobody's looking at each other, and everybody's very like autonomous, almost robot-like, and very like, you know, there's not that emotion sort of thing. So like what we do with the free hugging, you know, and Noah sort of talked about this well, it's almost creating this interference pattern where it injects a new code into the matrix where it changes it. Whereas normally somebody would just walk past someone as a stranger, simply by having that invitation to do a free hug, it promotes this opportunity. And I know it was great because while I was there was one girl who gave you guys a free hug, and she said, like, straight up, she's like, you guys made my day. Like, this is awesome. Like, thank you so much. And that's the power of it. So I mean, yeah, well, I'd like to just hear a little bit more from you guys, you know, just a little bit more about like what your motivation is, what your drive is on this, and then we'll pass it off to Paradox as well and just get the conversation bouncing around. But yeah, just go ahead, Alon, just tell us more, and we'll just preface it. So for everybody listening to this, go to facebook.com/GoLoveTrip and check that out and show your support, and keep an eye open for that because they might be coming to a town near you. So there you go. But yeah, Alon and Oz, just tell us a little bit about you know, like, why are you doing this and what changes are coming about and what you hope to see.
Okay, well, I'll say my thing, and if the guys want to join in and say what their part, I'll be glad. For me, it's like inspiration for people, and like I think free hugging is inspiring. It's like that girl who said that made by day, and I think two people said to me today, like, my faith in humanity has been restored, like,
Yes,
because we
exactly.
used to so many I mean the opposite of unity, it's like separation, like, in almost everything, in our economy, in our way of behavior, in our in our poverty, in our culture, it's separation. But doing free hugs is uniting, and by even the simplest of things, even before the hugs. I mean, the hugs is just like a name for like a session that people come and offer themselves to know more people. Yeah, but it doesn't actually have to be the hug for me. It's like the fact that someone intentionally looks in someone else's eye and greets him. I think has so many strong energies in that, because it's like one of the most. It's like the thing that we are most try to not to do. When we walk in the street, just not to look at someone's eye, like, oh, it's embarrassing, like, oh, he's looking, like, but seriously, looking in each other's eye is so important. That eye contact, that we are looking always at the screens and iPhones and stuff. But making eye contact and greet someone and offer him a hug, I think it's simply inspiration for the both sides. But what I'm personally trying to do is like yourself, try to bring it on the internet so even more people could get inspired by it.
Yeah, and then of course
I think.
Go ahead.
I just think just free hugs is simply like really changing energies. You just put positive energy into something and into the system, and it really changes people and makes them do really good stuff.
Yeah, and I'll just say a quick thing here, and I'll pass it off to Paradox, get some other angles in on this. But again, like the hug initiates a conversation, and the conversation is so valuable. It is equally as valuable as like the moment of the hug itself, especially when these people, like you said, like you restored my faith in humanity. Let's talk for a little bit, like where is this coming from?
Exactly.
And then even what we were saying, like we were trying to get downtown, but we kept running into people in the park, and we kept talking to them for like 10, 15 minutes, and we're just like, oh my goodness. And then through those conversations, the majority of the people who we had a good conversation with were people who were interested in a lot of this paradigm shifty stuff. And then,
and they were like, I'm going to come to the next paradigm shift meeting.
Exactly, yeah.
So easy.
And that's how easy it is. Like from our end of it, that's why I keep encouraging people how successful this is. Like you can literally kickstart a paradigm shift community in a day if you do free hugs and you have a pamphlet that invites someone to the next meeting that you have, and that's what we did. So I mean, I guarantee you there are people who are tuned into this show tonight who heard about it because you guys were out there doing the free hugs, and we passed on the information to them there. But yeah, I love the idea of synchronicity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to pass it off to Paradox. Paradox, have you ever done something specifically like free hugs or something very similar? And just what are your thoughts on the potential behind something like that?
Absolutely. I worked with a circus that for many years to the world and create little stories, and those stories were like getting people connected with their, like basically a lot of the performers wearing things that were technologically inspired and asking people, excuse me, where we're going? And that, just the question, the sentiment of asking someone a question out in the world with a sentiment of an already agreed field of like an agreement field. If you have a troop of people, let's say these 5 people that go out and we're going to do, hugs together, or we're going to ask people a specific question, or we're going to instigate an action and then check in with the people that are witnessing the action. There's Augusto Boal, an incredible theater person that did a thing called the Theater of the Oppressed, where he would go into communities that were, in some form of oppression, and they would do theatrical retellings of what had happened. within the community. And then they, so they would enact them, and then they would open it up and have people do a kind of forum conversation about what they had witnessed, and then they would redo it with a different outcome. So my question really to the community that is listening, as well as the people who are here, is, when we find this agreement field, or when we wish to instigate this agreement field, or a new code, or a new carrier wave, for the intention that I see is, or really the question is, how does returning to that kind of agreement, or a kind of primal awareness, which is, I believe that a lot of the innate nature of humanity is we're focused around a center, whether that's the bonfire, or whether that's the village center, or whether it's, watering hole back in ancient times. A lot of the field of what's being generated is what was originally grooming. The way that see monkeys grooming each other and making sounds and indicating, something of curiosity. And, so it's like, how does returning to that sentiment of togetherness and together, how does that act the system? And, the first thing, because it's kind of like what we do innately. And so much of contemporary culture is about what can we add on to our extensions of the legs. Computer is an extension of our nervous system. So when we extend ourselves, we kind of lose the center. And all of the things that I hear you to instigate, and what it does to the matrix, is it says we're going to center ourselves around each other rather than our jobs, the codes that we have to survive in the city with. So when we break those, when we create a code that actually has an older code of the actual intention of, which is to cooperate and work together, then we create a new but very ancient sentiment, which is creating it together. So I would love to feel into more of and investigate more in what is successful along those lines.
Right.
I feel like festivals are really this center place, like the watering hole and the bonfire of our contemporary time.
The festivals,
that got really interested in the 60s, that people were going to come together for music, and slowly it's built into a kind of jigsaw project where we're learning, oh no, these are the tools that work for people. These are the tools that actually bring us into togetherness, bring us into a group awareness, and a kind of, moving together, localized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think thank you, Paradox, and thank you, Alon, as well. I'd like to actually just sort of backstep a little bit, and not that we missed it, but just to sort of give the audience, better context of what it is we're talking about, especially with the title of this episode being Social Alchemy. What does that mean? What does alchemy mean to begin with, and what does social alchemy mean? And in the basic way, how I think at this point, a lot of people who are sort of, researching a lot of this stuff, they've heard the word alchemy, and I think if you were to boil it down, no pun intended, so to speak, but it would be this idea of transformation. Alchemy is a transformation. So when we're talking about alchemy from the esoteric point of view, it was disguised as something. Well, it was something where it was literally the transformation from precious metals into other precious metals, and this was something that a lot of people they had trouble believing it, or they thought it was this sort of folklore sort of thing. But then oftentimes, whether regardless of how practically capable this, how real this actually was, oftentimes what it was actually referring to, these scriptures, these books about alchemy, about transformation of the metals, were metaphors, were esoteric texts referring to the transformation of the spirit, the transformation of the mind, the transformation of the self, and how that happens, how this crystallization process occurs over time. And this is something where if you're really getting into it, it would be about self-investigation. It would be about meditation. It would be about looking within and transforming yourself from within, and through that you change the world around you, which, again, a lot of people are quite familiar with. So the idea of social alchemy is this idea of, like, as we continue to do the work on ourselves, how do we continue to bring it outside of ourselves? Because it's great to be like, hey, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do it by changing myself. But then you have to do something more. Once you have prepared your vessel, once you have begun to crystallize yourself, you bring yourself out in there. You put yourself into the playground, and you begin to invite other people to play along with you. You create these games, you create these codes, you write these systems, and you begin to just, like we said, you create these interference patterns that they themselves are changing the alchemy of our society, are changing the alchemy of our culture. But yeah, I'd just be curious, actually, just to pass it back to Paradox, because being just like slightly just older and having the experience that you have, I'd be curious as to how you would interpret the phrase social alchemy, because it's kind of a new phrase. It's just sort of I'll actually give it, the first time I heard it was actually from our good buddy Jordan Levine. I will say that, the Riff Shaman. You can find him on YouTube. He's been on the show in the past, and it just stuck with me. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Like, social alchemy is kind of synonymous to shiftivism, which is the word that we use for showing acts of love, which is again, like that activism, but it's not just activism, it's love, so it's shiftivism. So it works for us. But again, Paradox, I'd be curious, the phrase social alchemy, how does that resonate with you? What does it mean? How do you interpret that?
Well, I think one of the basic tenets of alchemy was transforming lead into gold. And what that means to me is that lead is the heaviest metal. It's how we dated the earth, because once it reaches the lowest, the nadir point, the lowest point of development, that's the mineral that shows up, and it doesn't change anymore. And I refer to lead in social situations as that which closes you down. That's what, the eye contact thing. It's like that which keeps you from looking at others, that which keeps you in yourself. It's the heaviest metal. And transforming into gold, which is a conduit. It is a conduit between energies. It's the purest signal. It carries the purest signal. So what we're doing, there's contagious diseases. We're altering that sentiment to contagious diseases. And looking for that, what sentiments we put into the world that are actually, that generate a response from life, that fosters more responses from life to be in the natural processes. So, primal technology, social alchemy, and shiftivism are essentially bringing people into a higher level of agreement. And Terence McKenna talks a lot in this one speech that's brilliant, that I will send a link to you, Brendon, about. And hopefully you can put it out to people to watch. It's a brilliant piece, and one of the things he talks about is how the universe tends towards complexity. Mm-hmm. It started with electrons that slowly built towards eventually molecules and eventually carbon, which became life, and then it continued to refine. And one of the things that I see with doing things like giving someone a hug is that after that hug is given, that person says, I'm open to your field. I want to know who you are, because that's our nature. Mm-hmm. And the sentiment of how we together, how we work together in tandem, being able to get along and achieve results, part of what I think social alchemy is there to promote. It's that contagious, it's that agreement field where we say, what are you concerned? Mm-hmm. What do you care about? How do I give more attention to what the collective is seeing? That's what gold does. It connects energies. Whereas lead blocks energies and pushes lead. So it's that refinement, bringing a higher level of, I say complexity, but it's actually agreement. And it's agreement of things in the world working together to make everything easier, much in the way, not to keep going on, but much in the way that like the P2P principle works, where it's like if you have a piece of media that you're downloading, if you have 10 people downloading it, because the computers know how to work together, suddenly that code gets accelerated. And, something 7 minutes, you have 100 people working on it together. It's that connection and the communication and the agreement to work together that is that mutual leadership where everyone's a leader.
Yeah.
So that to me is social alchemy. It's understanding that everyone is composed of all elements, but the majority of what we run.
Oh, Paradox, we just want to say that again, where your mic's cutting out a little bit sometimes.
Okay, so instead of basically that lead is something that blocks energy, and gold is a conduit for energy. So it's that sense of if everyone is a leader and everyone learns that they can trust each other for different things, then they can step up into leadership with people saying, I'm with you. What is it that you need? How can we work together? And there's so much in this world right now that requires our agreement, that requires us coming together and linking up and syncing up. When you talk about synchronicity, it's really that agreement field, in my opinion, that brings that together.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. I'll pass it over to Alon or any of the other guys with you there. Just anything that you guys just want to add, feel free.
First, I want to say thank you. By the way, Paradox, amazing stuff what you said. We really connect to it, to what you said about social alchemy, and it is a small amount. Each free hug session is a small amount of connecting and agreeing. Some field of energy that is being agreed on when we do the free hug is created between the random people hugging, and it was awesome. I just want to say just a couple, maybe like for the listeners, if they don't know what Love Trip is,
Go ahead, dude. Yeah.
So me and Avi here, when we listened to Paradigm Shift stuff that Cole did before, then we were inspired to do, we thought about doing something in Israel, and we did, and we started free hugging. And Oz was an old friend that moved to Canada, and we wanted to visit him. So we thought about a trip together. We found this fundraising site, and we thought about a free hug road trip of free hugs in Canada. And so that's what it is. Love Trip is a road trip of good deeds and free hugs and smiles and good energy and connecting and inspiring people. We started today in London, and we're planning to go all the way up to east to Halifax, going through Toronto and Wasaga Beach and Quebec and Montreal and Ottawa, and we just want to meet as many as good people. And if you know good people in those cities, please contact us and link us so we can have huge free hug session and great social alchemy and shiftism and transformation. And that's it. We're really happy to meet you today. And if you guys are in London and you want to do another free hug session, we're up for it tomorrow. So contact us through Facebook.
For sure, man. It was an absolute pleasure being able to run into you today, straight out of the Matrix, as I said.
Exactly.
But, yeah, for sure, man. Let me just check in. Are you guys? Do you guys got to go soon? Because I just know you're calling in with your phone.
No, we're with you, man. We're with the campfire.
You're cool.
With the show.
Oh man,
yeah.
Perfect. I can feel that vibe of the campfire, man. I think anybody. anybody just sort of listening to this, even what going off of what Paradox was saying, you sort of need that central point. You need that watering hole that we can sort of come and gather around, and that's what this radio show is. And so it is that community fire pit that we sort of return back to, which I think is a really cool thing. And it is what Paradox was talking about. Like this idea of the agreement that is created. I think that in itself is such a magical thing, and I'd actually even just be able to hear a little bit more from Alon and the boys, just from their personal experience. Just what happens when you do, like you said, you're just in that situation where like you're doing your thing, you're doing a free hug thing, and then somebody else sees you, somebody who probably like may not have too many people that they feel that they can talk to, so to speak. They might be someone who considers themselves like reclusive, or like even just like introvert, so to speak, or maybe they're interested in a lot of this paradigm shifty stuff, but they've never really had anybody to talk to about it. And then suddenly like you go and you're just like, like here's your hug, like thank you, you're awesome, like I see you, like namaste on the truest level. And then that person, when you invite them to have that conversation with you, think about how much that really means to them, especially for someone who hasn't had too many people to have that conversation with. Like what really, like, that is opening up a new door for them. As a human being, there's like, this is a fresh experience for me, like I'm living in a society that is constantly sort of like trying to keep us in chains, so to speak. And then here we are, like literally like these beacons of light, and we're creating opportunities. Like that is really like what this magic is. Like through the free hugs and stuff, each one creates an opportunity. It creates an opportunity for the universe to be able to cooperate with you and to meet you halfway. And I'll just take a second here to really just touch upon the idea of synchronicity, because I mean that is how the free hugs work. And synchronicity was something that I personally became aware of back in around like 2008, 2009, and it was from like personal experience. It was situations where I ran into certain people, like I was sort of putting out the intention to meet certain people, and this was before Paradigm Shift even officially began, and I met the right people at the right place at the right time, like beyond coincidence sort of thing. And then I was just like, wait a second, like if this isn't coincidence, then that means that there's a pattern, there's a system, there's a program that is running here, like synchronicity.exe. So then I was sort of asking, like, okay, so how does this program work? Like, what is this synchronicity? And how can it be utilized? How can my awareness of the fact that it exists be utilized? You hear people talk about the ideas of the law of attraction, the law of thermodynamics. I think in a very real way there is this law of synchronicity, but rather it's not always finite, but rather it's a potential. It's the potential for the universe to be able to bring two things together in the same way that, if there's a black hole, then it sort of creates this gravitational field that pulls other objects in towards it. And every object has its own gravitational field. I mean, just stepping outside the circle here, I think more and more people are beginning to realize this, but like everything is a black hole. And this is an idea I've had for a while, and we actually talked to a girl who we ran into in the park today, and she was talking about it. She was like, yes, like the event horizon of a black hole is a fractal. Like, yeah, like Mandelbrot fractals are Buddha like things. When you take the Buddha and you turn it sideways, it looks like a Mandelbrot fractal. That was just, but anyways, so the synchronicity, what happens is that this is how you hack the matrix. When I do free hugs by myself, as an example, I can stand at a street corner with a free hug sign with the understanding that simply by standing there, I am creating a portal. And portal is sort of like this vernacular, this lexicon that I'm sort of using to help describe this, to give us a way to be able to explain this. So by standing in one spot with a free hug sign or moving around, you create a portal. You create a portal through that is an opportunity, and the portal actually has its own gravitational field to it. So by me standing on a street corner with a free hug sign, I am standing there with the understanding that as long as I put out the good vibes, so to speak, that the right people will cross my path at the right time, which is an amazing thing, because you don't always have to chase people around with a free hug sign. Yes, it works when you walk through a park because some people are stationary, so you come to them. But if you're downtown in a city, and like this is the tactics of hacking the matrix for the people listening to this, so take notes. You can do that. You can stand at a corner where there's traffic and you'll probably have, you know, like a lot of people walking past you. But even the people walking past you are still being influenced by your pattern, by your portal. They're still observing it. It's still going into their conscious mind, regardless of whether or not they decide to hug you. But through that, it creates a synchronistic opportunity that the people who are in line with that, who are resonating a similar vibration, will find themselves where you are, and they'll be like, yes, like opportunity, portal, like I'm jumping in, and they jump into it, and they jump into your agreement, they jump into your invitation, and again, like that's where the opportunity is created, that's where the magic happens, and then what we do with that opportunity is sort of where our free will comes into play, and then we sort of get to play around, we get to mold things, we get to choose what happens next, but the understanding that it can happen in the first place is what hacking the matrix is all about. It's not this idea that like, oh, I'm afraid to go do free hugs because it won't work. Like, no, the fact is it will work so long as you do it. And it might take a little bit of practice. It might take like a little bit to like get around your bubble, which is a very interesting idea because, you know, like me and Alon were talking about this. Sometimes when you're first out there and you first bust out the free hug sign, it takes you a moment to get warmed up because there's like this weird part of our mind that's just being like this isn't normal, this isn't different, like this is different. But that is like part of the motivation. It's like there's a good quote, and this is actually, well, it's a phrase, it's something that, it's not a quote, it's something that I've said for quite some time, but it's the idea that in order to make a difference, one must be the difference. So, you know, one must be the interference pattern. One must be like literally, like Neo, like be the one who's going to be on that street corner with a free hug sign, who's going to be there to like make people smile. And if you're doing it out of love, if you're really playing around with the idea of checking in with yourself and saying, what energies am I projecting out, you know, and sort of imagine yourself standing on a street corner and add in the fifth dimensional perception of the fact that everything is emanating ripples all the time. Like, what ripples are you sending out, and how are they interfering with other people? How are they merging? How are they becoming a part of someone else's field? And then, you know, that person just like, they're like, I don't know why I went down the street, I just felt pulled towards it, and then I found you, and now I'm glad I'm here, and this is awesome. So it's almost like this third man effect, which some of you may have heard, like this idea that, you know, like you can even play around with the idea of like spirit guides and you know, intuition, and how that will actually help guide people to where you are so that you can be in the right place at the right time. So working with free hugs, working with shiftivism is a very interesting way to practice developing your own intuition, to practice opening you up to begin with, and it's really just amazing what magic comes out of it. And again, that is why we repeat this message. That is why I emphasize that people do this, because not only is it an experience for yourself, but it's also doing something that, like Alon said, like we said, it is making people's day. It is giving them hope in humanity. And of course, if you want, like, go to ParadigmShiftCentral.com. You can get the links there. Go to ParadigmShiftCentral.com/tools, and you can download the links there for the free hug signs that I already got made up for you guys, so that you can download them, use them easy, use some of the pamphlets, invite people back to the show, et cetera, et cetera. But that is, like, seriously, it's potent stuff. So the synchronicity is the ability, again, to draw, for the universe to bring two things together into the same place, and then to create that opportunity. And then again, you know, like our free will determines what happens next. But again, that's just my way of sort of explaining it. I'll pass it back over to Paradox. Paradox, I just anything that you might just want to add into that, and you know, just maybe your own understanding of synchronicity and how you see that playing in, and just other ways as to how, you know, like how can we hack the matrix? Maybe, you know, there's more ideas than just doing free hugs. What other tactics might we be able to use? I'd be curious. If there's anything else that you just want to add, feel free.
I mean, that last bit was extremely inspiring. Took a little notes. You know, a sense of each person, each idea, that's in the world has its gravity. Rule of the universe is that even light bends with gravity, and the gravity knows, you know, pervasive forces that exists in the universe. So, you know, we being like this tiny speck in the universe, meant that, you know, we're not creating something new. We're remembering how to utilize what's already here. Mm-hmm. And as we
Sorry, Paradox. Just your mic is cutting in and out sometimes. I don't know if you just want to try muting and unmuting yourself. I don't know if that might fix it. But again, if you can just repeat whatever the last part was that you said. Just want to make sure we can hear you.
The sentiment, of each idea, each person, each institution, each behavior has its own gravity, has its own sense of and their participation, is not a new thing. It is a remembering of the natural law. It is a remembering way in which life operates. Buckminster Fuller has an incredible poetic that I use all the time and is the center of what we do, and it is most culture is used as a weapon to manipulate and separate and bring people to become consumers as opposed to citizens, participants. Living rate, or is it of weaponry? We can really clearly see how much of this thing that I'm looking at or participating in is for life. So when we look at every hug, it is a score. It is a composition, and it's a very simple one. The idea is I put up a sign, I walk out there, and I'm going to interact and be really transmissive. I'm going to transmit my ease. I'm going to transmit my communication. That changed. I'm going to directly interface with somebody. The result of that score is
sorry. You're cutting out. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But just repeat whatever you just said there.
So the sentiment of scores, and a score can be any way of looking at anything. It's like time, the way in which we create the calendar is a score. It is the most simple thing is I'm going to do something. It's very, it's like a basic principle. I know that if I and things between them, that's a simple score. The money chant is a much more complex score.
Mm-hmm.
You sit in a pine shape so that you're doing gestures that are all the same, but at different times, so they interlink. You have one group of people that's doing one rhythm, and then across the circle, you have a group of people same rhythm, but off. So the energy of I'm building this energy over here in this group, but then emitting it from generate a certain kind of energy exchange that actually is palpable. You can feel it in the space. And so the that I would say about what is it that we're doing and how we what social activism is, what social alchemy is that we're creating social behaviors that then become structural agreements. Mm-hmm. And this is my understanding how the Native American.
So, Paradox, your mic is. I'm not sure if there's a technical way that we might be able to fix your mic. Maybe if might just want to try like hanging up and I'll re-add you. That may fix it. Do you want to try that real quick?
Yeah. I mean, if it feels like it's really that strong of a thing. If you can't hear me, then yeah, let's try that again.
Well, it's always ironic because as soon as I say let's do that, it usually fixes itself. So let's keep going, and then if it's bad enough, then that will be we'll just do that. And I'll just take a second. But go ahead, just continue what you were saying. Like just in terms of the social alchemy, and go ahead. Yeah.
In my view and what I've seen, I've on of Occupy, I got to watch a lot of the structures that people worked with skills of, when someone's talking, if you feel I've talked too long, you do like a rolling thing over your hands, or if you agree, you do like a twinkle fingers thing. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, because there was an agreement, it became a kind of governance. What I'm saying is that this hugs, you then call people together and they say, you know what, I'm about what this person is about. When you get together and you decide we're going to start a project, we're going to make worldwide hugs every day, then you're in an agreement field, and then you begin to break it apart into different scores. You're going to go over here and do this. You're going to go over here and do this. And we begin to find counsel with each other. One of the things that I'm really focused on now is I'm producing a feature film based on Starhawk's novel, The Fifth Sacred Thing. And in The Fifth Sacred Thing, it's 20 years of people living off the matrix. And the one thing that we have in modern mythical society, what we don't have in our society as a myth, is what would it look like? How would it behave if instead of focusing on the institutions of corporations, what would have made the focus each other and honoring diversity and honoring the principles of nature? And in the book, it opens up all of these things that have been hidden from us for so long. So the Fifth Sacred Thing being an example, something that I can work on that will get the image out there that millions will see of how people behave together, because we don't have a model for it. We don't know how it operates. We don't know what it looks like, except for the small exchanges that we have, let's say, at a festival, or with someone on the street, or with our partner, or with a friend, But in the larger social structures, we don't have a reflection of that basic tenet of how does life operate for life? Because life operates very well for corporations, we can see that. But do corporations operate very well for life? Not so much. So, on a small scale, every little bit counts. Every integer of contagious behavior that is fostering the feeling of togetherness, is that field. But then those things begin to start congealing, and you begin to get agreements and agreement fields that build into a movement or a system of governance. I believe that what our calling is, and the necessity of our times, is to honor the structure that supports and reinforces life, and really understanding what that means. Because right now, a lot of people say, well, life includes all of these things that actually are weapons. And so being able to generate scores, whether they're as simple as the hug, or once you get together and say, well, why don't we try this new thing? And if it works, then you keep it. And for me, that's what ancient traditions are. There are thousands of years of people saying, does this work? No, that didn't work too well. Does this work? Yes. Let's keep it. You draw a circle around it, you turn it into a symbol, or make it a character in a myth, and that's what has the carrier wave beyond an individual life. That's what gives us the ability to generate new scores and new ways of being that actually are best, that work best for the people that are in it. So, that journey from lead to gold is just an acknowledgement of the natural abundance that we already have. That's why I said it was a remembering. It's not a new thing. We can refine it, and as we refine it, we're adding to the complexity of universe. But it is something, the basic tenet and tendency of finding that agreement field is the way that universe works.
Yeah, definitely, and I think I was able to fix the technical aspect on the microphone there. I would just have to mute myself when you're talking, but yeah, most definitely. I think what is really interesting about this, and you can hear me, okay? I imagine just an 11:11 from everybody in the live chat, just to confirm. But yeah, it should be sounding good. But just what you were saying, I think what is really interesting here is that we're creating memes. And memes are like social memes, and memes are a word that a lot of us are familiar with. We see internet memes all the time. We see cats with bread on their head all the time, So we see all these humorous memes. But what happens when we start to create memes that are, again, these social alchemy memes, these memes of doing free hugs, and also other ways that we can really just, I think if we step back and we say, like, what is our objective here? What is our objective? Our objective, like Paradox, like you were saying, is to remember. And that's something that I've innately, just intuitively felt for such a long time, is that, again, just to reiterate, so much of what we're doing, so much of understanding our connection to reality and our potential within it is a process of remembering, because it's going back to where we have come from. It's us stepping into our power, our power as in our ability within this reality, again, as a conscious creators. So our objective, my objective, take this objective along with you if you choose to, but I think it's, we're all sort of connecting to the same thing here, and a lot of us are on that same wavelength, is to encourage other people to step into that awareness of seeing, like, seeing beyond the veil of the matrix, to see the unity. I mean, it really does come down to this idea of unity. You can start to get people seeing, like, how they themselves are the fractal nature of reality. Like, once you start to look at a tree a little bit differently, and you begin to see yourself as it, you begin to see us as the branches. And I mean, even when you think about, like, just looking at the tree model, take that, turn it sideways, look at it as a representation of time, so to speak, you can sort of see how synchronicity can almost work through it. Synchronicity is this idea that our realities are already existing in our future. Like, what is happening in the now is just like us catching up to the potential future realities, merging themselves back into the present. The trees, the branches on the trees, coming back into that nexus point, that middle point. And what, like, again, that's the toroidal field. We're seeing this, and what I'm super interested in is how can this idea of, like, oneness, how can this idea of everything being, like, made up of light and, there's no such thing as empty space, ... how can this be applied to my actions in a practical way? How can I use this understanding to be able to do stuff, to get things done? And that is what, going back to what I was talking about with the synchronicity, that's exactly what that is. That is me understanding how the universe works, remembering how it works, really, and then working with it, meeting the universe halfway. That's something that, in terms of social alchemy, I think we have to keep that in mind, is the idea that it's not just like us, like, passively waiting for the universe. There's an idea between, like, going with the flow and being passive, but to be able to meet the universe halfway is our objective, with the idea that, like, realities are existing in the future, we still have this free will thing in the present, and from there we're choosing different paths to get to different realities. And as we are more intuitively in our flow, again, opposite from, like, not, the same thing as being passive, but in our flow, we'll find that we'll travel along branches that will provide us with more nutrient, that will reach closer towards the sun, in the same way that you look at the branches of a tree and you see that not all the branches are as close to the sun as others, so to speak, or the same reason why, like, as a plant's growing in a time-lapse video, you see it bend towards the sun. We, by nature, bend towards the sun. We branch towards the sun. And stepping into alignment, getting into our flow within our present, allows us to do this more. So again, what I want to just reiterate is just, like, the potential to be able to create realities from the future, to be able to create new branches from the future. Like, from the future, we're constantly, like, exploding branches out of our chest, like, out of our now, and shooting like a lightning bolt, which is exactly why a lightning bolt looks like a lightning bolt when you think about it, because it's not just a lightning bolt, it's like the pattern of reality on micro and a macro. Again, branches and trees and veins in our arms, etc. So the social alchemy behind this is so potent, because not only is it something that is capable, it's not is it something that is real and plausible and practical and, like, able to actually happen, but it's something that the universe wants to happen innately. And that is what this process is about. Like, we are working on behalf of the universe to help wake itself up. And that's within our nature. And the reason why we're encouraging this, the reason why we're trying to do this with each other, is because it adds this extra level of, call it love, call it empowerment, call it, like, just, like, more expanded perception, call it a paradigm shift. It allows people to see the world around them differently. And it's one of less frustration, it's one of less fear, it's one, again, of going with the flow. And to be able to, like, project future realities from our present, to be able to say like, all right, like these ideas, our thoughts, where do they exist? Like, where are they? They're coming from the future in a lot of ways, if you think about it. So like, it's us being able to see our future from the present and be able to say like, I choose that branch. I'm going to shoot my lightning bolt in that direction. And we go boom, and we make a choice. And we're doing this all the time, just on different scales. Again, small choices and big choices. And that's another thing, just encouraging people, make the choices in our life like that are the right choices for us on small scales and large scales. If you're all into this consciousness shifting stuff, but you can't take 2 seconds to like put a bottle in the recycling instead of just throwing it away or something, check in with yourself is all I'm saying. And then just be able to like find integrity in a path. So going back to even what we were talking about way at the beginning, this idea of like captains amongst captains. This is like really a theme that I brought back with me from being in California, being with our good buddy Jesse Carrier, who, Paradox, you must know Jesse. Do you know it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just Jesse being a familiar guy in California, and he'll be on the show eventually too. But being that leader can sometimes be that person who is being that difference, who is doing that act of shiftivism. And just to really go back to what I was just wanting to bring back to share with you from a practical point of view, is the idea that like, how else can you engage in acts of shiftivism? Start getting creative. Start bringing your art into it. A simple, beautiful way that I've seen work quite effectively is to make little cards, like little business-sized pieces of paper, and to write things on them like, you have a beautiful smile, like you are loved, like I think you're an amazing person, and you can literally just like doodle on them and leave them places, or you can give them to people directly. And again, even the idea of like leaving a pamphlet or leaving something on a position, like a practical position, like on a park bench or on like a school bus or something, or just a bus on a seat, that will create an opportunity for synchronicity. And even like, regardless of size, that piece of paper has, again, its own gravitational field. You can think of it, because it's not just something, the gravitational field of something, from my best observation, is not something that's always like weighed by mass in any means, but also by like the energy associated behind it and the intention of the energy associated behind it. So, you like leave the pamphlet there with the intention of someone finding it. And so again, these are ways to engage in social alchemy, and even just like bringing your paradigm shifty perception into places where you can, such as like doing it for a school project, which is something I experimented with in the past. I'll just tell you guys. This is a quick story. Let me just take a drink real quick. You'll like this. I think I've probably mentioned on the show before, but back in my one of my graphics classes, back in like my 5th year, there was an assignment where we had to take old footage and new footage that was using CGI and be able to like compare and juxtapose the two, and then like, or just like one that like was using So anyways, a lot of people would do like modern day movies and stuff like that, and what I actually did, I started off by showing Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then talking about the technique of rear screen projection, in which it was different from back in the day where they would take a projector and then like film an image or project an image on it. Rather, this was just like from the back, so it wouldn't appear on the actors, so it would be behind them, so to speak. And this was what was used in the opening scene for 2001: A Space Odyssey with the apes, and like they're like, that's a very interesting, that whole movie, like Kubrick was a shifter. Like when you think about it, like a lot of the stuff he was like putting in his movies and everything, very interesting guy. So what I did is I talked about this scene, talked about this technique, and then my second video that I showed was like, and now for my like comparison, like here's another footage, and like here's the 1969 moon landing. And I was like, what? And people were just like, wait, what? And then I talked about like how the theoretical idea of the footage from the moon landing being filmed using front screen projection, which is the same technique that was used during 2001: Space Odyssey, which theoretically was the technique that Stanley Kubrick used so they think Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing as well as 2001: Space Odyssey. This is a theory. This is an idea that exists out there. This is an idea that I read about on the internet back in the day. I thought it was brilliant. I think it's plausible in a lot of ways. And you can check, I'll link in my video into this on the YouTube, or you can just find it on my YouTube under, again, youtube.com/skullbabylon. If you haven't checked that out, sub that and share it with your parents and everything. So from that, it was just really cool, and that planted seeds. So social alchemy is a process of opening portals, creating portals, and planting seeds. If I were to boil it down to just that, so that's that's my story of one way of how we can engage in social alchemy in all sorts of different places. And I'd actually be curious, Paradox. I mean, from the stuff you've done, maybe like what stuff have you actually done, like out in like public spaces or just anything like that in terms of shiftivism or theatrical performances or anything?
I think a lot of my 20s were composed of it, and that refined my 30s into a circus troupe that did work like that. I'd like to actually talk about Edward T. Hall. This is a good time for you to mute because the creaking of your chair is what actually probably...
Yeah, definitely already got that solved, so it's all you, brother.
Edward T. Hall is a great anthropologist I was turned on to by a good friend, and he is basically the one that I've used to create templates for alien economies, alien cities, and the function of how different cultures could operate, because he really gives a beautiful overview of the ways in which the elements of human behavior are elements of the universe. And the way that he deals with this is he talks about time in those terms. So there's a bodily time, like how long it takes to digest a meal, how long it takes for an electrical pulse to go from, one nerve to another, the amount of time that it takes for the heart to pump. Those are biological time. Then there's like the time it takes for the Earth to revolve around the sun, or the Earth to revolve so it goes day to night. That's another kind of time. Then every single culture has its own way of relating to time, which is what happens a lot with the problems between like the Native American tribes and the culture, the matrix culture that comes in saying, we're going to build you a dam. It looks like this. It's going to be like this. And they just kind of like impose it on top of the way that these people operate, but they're not listening. They're not listening to what actually is occurring. And so, but the biggest piece of time that I linked in with was this idea of sync time, synchronized time. And it's very much to do with the P2P concept that I was talking about earlier. 1 human second of 7 billion people equals about 1,300 and something years. So 1 human second is 1,000 years. So if you get people, a lot of people, to do the same thing, you're changing the trajectory of human time. And everything about this unification of people, unification of intention, the agreement field itself is all about syncing time so that people are in the same agreement field, but they're also, another way to word it, is they're in the same time. We think of time as as clock time, 1 second, da-da-da. That's a score. That has been created for us. But the truth is the universe operates in many forms of time. And so, one of the things that I think of when we're talking about synchronicity and we're talking about actions in the world, there are some actions like that the Buddha talked about and was always a mystery to me, and Lao Tzu talked about, is action versus non-action. What is non-action? Non-action is the sense of listening and responding without your own intention. And I think that that's a really important piece when we're talking about, when you're out there and you're doing this and you're listening, you're kind of like, the basic permaculture principle is like you observe for a long time how the sun moves, where the sun touches, where rain falls, what areas, have the, insects already there, what plants are already growing. You observe until you find the patterns, and then you instigate. So, a really great example in fiction of this idea of what's a great thing to do, and it touches what you were talking about with like leaving the pamphlets, is there's a story by Bruce Sterling, which has the same name as the cat with the arm that goes up and down, the abundance cat. And basically a man comes from America because the Japanese can no longer they've dropped out of the world economy. They can no longer figure out how they fit in. And the reason is because their technology, their telephones, actually indicate who's close to them and what they want or need. So there's a way in which, like, they, someone, your phone will go, there's a person within a block who wants the boots that are in the store that you're right next to, and you have a surplus of money. Why don't you buy it for them? And so all of a sudden, everyone is gifting each other. And you get to see, like, that actually money falls apart in this, everyone is separated. Instead, everyone's actually entwined by it. And that all of these things are actually linked up. So if we're willing to really kind of be present and listen and observe to what is actually happening, we can actually, I believe there's this sentiment there for being able to find what people need, what needs to be gifted. So, at festivals we see it a lot. At Burning Man we see the gift economy being raised. But, a lot of the things that I did with the troops was approaching people and beginning to relate to them and play with them with very simple scores. And they were all empowerment scores. So being able to find ways with the circus where it's about either asking a question of each person in the area, or it's about doing some kind of a dance that brings people's attention together and then inviting them into the next level of whatever that is. So what I would do with the circus was the goal of the circus, Mystic Family Circus, which is a troupe I worked with from 98 until 2006, was the goal was we're the circus, but at the end, everyone of the audience is part of the circus. So you invite them into the choruses of what people are doing. You bring them in, you sing with them, you create places and opportunities for them to play as part of the role. And at the end, everyone is the circus. And I think that's that contagion. And I got to see it over and over again with people's intentions being clear from the inside, of that agreement field, that it slowly becomes everyone that's around you. And that, I can cite a number of different instances, but I think just to keep it to that basic, the template is, how do you include people in what you're doing as opposed to perform for them, invite them into and to participate? A great thing, again, it was at Burning Man, so it was a certain kind of, everyone's already in an agreement field. But we would do things where we would do 3 days prior to the performance. We would just go and invite people to have initiations with us. And there were different sects or different groups that were each, like in one case, it was the four humors. So it was like the sanguine, like some people were really fiery, some people were the melancholics. And they had this, again, a very strong agreement field of what these groups were. And they created them and worked with them. And then we would go and initiate people from Burning Man into the group. And by the time they left, they felt like, I'm a part of this. And they showed up at the performance, and we'd perform with 500 people, And the circus was very much the same tenet, it was, that I had learned there in that kind of incubation. And it was, what are the tools? What are the things that are really contagious? And rather than tell you what I think they are, I would say, create a group of people, like the people that, what's the name of the people who are traveling? What's their
Yeah, that's the Love Trip project, yeah.
So that's a very clear, you have a group, as soon as you have 3 people or 2 people or even one person, if you go, this is the code that we're putting out, you realize that people are really ready to find the carrier wave of that code and to continue the flow of that action. And so I would say, experiment and, look at the things that you see as in the world that are old and ancient, that have worked over and over and over again. This is why the sweat lodge, yoga, in my case, the monkey chant, religious ceremony, singing together, all of these things are the same kind of contagion that where people go, oh, I know I can feel connected through this. And it's more about, the activism or the paradigm shift, how that interfaces is you go, well, this thing seems to work. How do we get it into the street? This thing seems to work. How do we get it into a venue where it's not usually there so that we can invite people to participate, and rather than being a missionary for it, just kind of instigating and then observing. Because again, that's where non-action fits in. Mm-hmm. If you're constantly putting ideas out, if you're constantly saying, this is my idea, you're not going to get the full effect. You actually need to be in non-action, which is all about response and all about listening and receiving what's coming up for people. Right. And then respond to that, because you're just doing your own agenda trip, and there's not really the difference between you and a missionary. But the difference is, if you're there with something and you're there to learn, there's a great phrase that I picked up from this woman in Oakland, a preacher, who said, preaching is doing your learning in public. She's obviously a very enlightened preacher, but the sentiment is, if you're there to learn and not just there to promote your agenda, then you're going to find a lot more, and you're going to find a lot more of what's useful for people. So rather than me telling you stories of all of the things I've done, because I've done hundreds of these kinds of actions, and all of them, a lot of them very different, it's more, what do you see that you think might work? Go and try it. Be brave. Find the people that are going to be brave with you and go and instigate that action. And then see what happens. And as part of it, be in observation and in listening and responding. Because otherwise, like I said, you're really just doing your story.
Yeah, that was very well said, man. Definitely. Like, on the inspiration level, it's that was good. That's the point though. Like, we're almost standing back and throwing like pebbles into the water of reality, and then allowing the ripple, because what I was talking about, these portals and stuff, that's the idea, is that you're playing around with the unexpected. You're not trying to, you're creating an opportunity. Once again, you're creating this platform for the universe to play in. One thing that was really interesting in a free hug session that we were doing, it was actually, there's a video of this, but it was during the homecoming with like the local university, and eventually it got to the point where like I wasn't even involved with it. I started it. Me and my buddy like Tyler started it, and then like enough people were just like, "Hey, like, can I like grab the sign and try using it too?" People who were, well, at that point mostly just like drunk university students, but still like there was a very positive energy because they won the game that day, and a lot of people were just in a hugging mood. But as a social experiment, because essentially the social alchemy, the actions of Shittivism, whatever you're referring to it as, they are social experiments. You have to look at it that way. Like Paradigm Shift as a project in itself is just that, is this big like social experiment. Well, I mean big and it's kind of sort of a relative scale, but it's a social experiment in the sense that what I'm doing, what I'm inviting people to do with me is to practice sharing any of our ideas. So, like with this whole Paradigm Shift Radio project, like listen in for future shows, and you'll have that opportunity for anybody to call in and be able to talk amongst each other in this talking circle. So, I mean, the more people who start tuning into Paradigm Shift, it's just like growing this opportunity for all of us to be able to check in with ourselves as a conscious, that reflection of the full consciousness. But again, that is where, for me personally, it's exciting to invite people to doing the free hugs thing and inviting people to Paradigm Shift. It's really cool because it doesn't come off as preachy, in the sense that you're not there to tell people what to think. You're there to invite people out to a community event where they're encouraged to think for themselves. So, but sorry, Paradox, I think if you had something to say, and then we're going to pass over to Alon. He's there. He's still with us. He's just on mute at the second, and we'll bring him on. And there's a couple other things I'll mention, but we'll get to that. But yeah, sorry, Paradox, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that, this is what's interesting to me, is that for, since I was 14 and playing for an audience, and then slowly began to dissolve the fourth wall and ask myself, how do I interface with the audience in a way that becomes the performance where they're participating? I did many, 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 many experiments. Mm-hmm. And what I returned to over and over is there are principles that work, and why I chose the monkey chant as the main medium that I go for is that it's a village technology. McLuhan, the sentiment of the medium is the message. Well, this is a technology that is thousands of years old that has been successful because it builds the infrastructure and the behavioral ease for people to participate. And so because of that, it then suddenly opens up. And once you've got that field open, because I've done some of these for like 9 hours, when one person begins to speak, everyone is flowering with them. It's a success story. Why? Because in part, someone worked at it, and then someone worked at it for their whole lives, and then someone else worked at it for their whole lives. So experiments are great, but really look to what has been successful in the universe and begin to base what it is that you're creating as an open score that people want to interface with as something that actually isn't just your idea. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, your idea might be something novel that is going to work, but what I've found over the, 30 years of experimenting is that there are some things that really work, and you can play inside them. You don't have to make something new. You can find the things that are successful because thousands of years of people doing it prove that this works. Singing together, it just works. Do you know what I mean? Like a hug, it just works. So that's, just to piggyback what you were saying, it's like finding the scores in the world that actually are successful already, and then creating a way to interface with them and get people to participate is really the thing that having others with you makes it refined. Does that make sense?
That does. And even when you're just referring to scores, like for me, the word that makes more sense for me is like programs, just using the computer analogy. So you're right. It's like playing with these programs like freehugs.exe, and then you just sort of like you play with that game. It's a very interesting game you can play with, and like similar games you can even just think of like somebody who's like busking on the corner, like that in themselves, similar thing, and especially if they're there doing a promotion of love. So I mean, just play around with the different programs that you can write, that you can play for yourselves, that are just ways of yourself expressing love. And I really encourage people to take this as, like in different directions, and even so much to be able to hold you guys into integrity, to make you decide for yourself the idea to choose to make a commitment to, let's say, like do 5 quote unquote shifty things between this show and the next show, and even just creating that as a game. Like who's gonna do that? How hard is it? Is that something that you could easily do in like 10 minutes? Like maybe. So it's interesting. That would be an interesting thing. Just putting that out there to the audience. Between this week and next week, we'll create the opportunity for people to call into the show to talk about the 5 shifty things, or any of the shifty things that they did between this show and the next show. And we'll stick with it. That's the kind of things that we can play with here on this radio show, because it's very, very, a lot of opportunity. So I know, Paradox, you probably got something to say, and we'll pass it over to Alon, maybe.
I just wanted to say I think it's a beautiful challenge, and a challenge in the best sense, not like, but just like, what are the things that you can do, anyone who's listening, what are the things that you might be able to do that would actually, that are just already something that you're good at, that you can do in a way that is for this intention. Because one of the things you really stated, I think, is very true, is when you put something out in the world, it's actually the quality with which it's put out that is that's the carrier wave. The code, and also something just that occurred to me is just remembering when we talk about programs and all of that stuff, it's based on the fundamentals of how the nervous system works. And so just not to confuse the menu with the meal, that a lot of the things that work in our technology, in our modern technology, are based on success stories of what works with life. And, the most successful pieces of our technology are the ones that are in direct concordance with the laws that govern life. So not to say that the program or any of those things are less than, it's just remember that there's a wider context for that kind of languaging. And just to wrap it up, just really, anyone who's listening, take this as an instigation and a kind of invitation to do something like this and see what it's like. Observe, respond, and then report.
There we go. Yeah, just had to unmute myself. But glad we fixed the microphone there for sure. But yeah, no, I think that'll be very very interesting thing. And this idea, I've just been sort of waiting to sort of play around with it and stuff too. So this is right place, right time. But it'll be an interesting thing to see what people will come back with next week. Now, we are going to bring Alon back onto the show, and actually, I wanted to just create another opportunity here, just play around with this. Paradox, we usually do a meditation during the episodes. I would invite you to do something, be it meditation or some other thing that you feel that we could do just to bring into embodiment, create embodiment as an embodiment practice and exercise. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Just to be able to do that for a short period before we end the show as our exercise or meditation exercise.
Would love it.
Perfect. Cool. We'd love to hear you say the fact that you will be willing to do that. I think that'll be awesome, and I'm excited. I'm excited because I don't know what he's gonna do. That's the thing, man. I'm telling you, this guy's a performer. Actually, I was reading this on your website. Now I'll just mention this because it's on the front of your website. The guy who plays Loki in the Thor movie. What's his name again?
Tom Hiddleston.
Tom Hiddleston, yeah, he himself was complimenting you for your involvement in helping him develop the character of Loki, which I think is a very very respectable title to have, to be able to because Loki is himself just a very interesting character, and he was my favorite part about the Thor movies, and that was just really exciting to see that again. This is, you're sort of planting seeds within the Hollywood matrix, and I'll just drop this real quick again, for the people who have heard in the past, the word Hollywood, the movie's Hollywood is referring to the Hollywood, which was a wand. The Hollywood was a tree that was commonly used to make wands used for spell casting. So the whole Hollywood system, the Babylon of Hollywood, that whole thing is a giant spell casting event that is happening, and that is where it's happening, these movies, these mythos. And that was a very interesting thing that we were talking about earlier in the show, what new mythos can we create, what new things can we see work, and then create characters of them, and then to bring into this world, sort of thing. But I think that's super awesome, Paradox, that Tom Hiddleston gave you that compliment. If you just, I don't know, what's he like? He's a cool guy, I imagine, eh?
He's a brilliant guy. He's really, really down to earth, really human, and that was, my experience on Thor was really exquisite because I got to work under the direction of Kenneth Branagh, who is an icon. He's kind of theatrically the guy who brought Shakespeare back, whatever. He has so much information and clarity in his process. And he really saw the value of what I was offering and gave me time with Thor, gave me time with Chris and Tom to really refine their characters. And, his challenge to me was, he walks like a prince, he walks like a nobility, but he doesn't have that God sensibility. Can you do that? And it was yes, I can do that, and how do you do that? You bring people into the awareness of things that are beyond the general scope of what they're aware of, which is what I'm going to do with the meditation. So, Tom's awesome. Chris is awesome. And Ken was really great to work for. So, it was definitely a defining moment in my life to be in those people's lives and to bring the magic that I have cultivated through all the street theater, all of the performance that I've done, to be able to, and also studies of ancient systems, what works, why does alchemy work? Astrology is based on the basic principles of breaking a system down into its components and then looking at them in relationship. And that principle, being able to take the Kabbalah, or, all of these systems kind of fall, work, are thousands of years of people saying, how do these systems work for humanity? So being able to base your study and your work on, human behavior, which is what we're talking about, how do people behave? How do systems affect humans? And how does just putting one little spell into the matrix actually shift the whole thing? But being able to create that in a foundation is what I got to explore in creating, in working with these incredible actors who are all really primed and tuned to create together. And so, that was, for me, it was a really defining moment for sure. And they're amazing characters, amazing people.
Cool. I think that's pretty neat to hear. Just, again, I would love to spend some time just in the Hollywood area of the world. Skull Babylon's going to Hollywood. So someday we'll see. Been pretty close. I mean, but definitely, Paradox. Thank you so much again for being a part of the show tonight. It really is absolute pleasure. I would happily just say that there's an open door. So if you ever want to be involved with Paradigm Shift Radio, the invitation is there, and we've gone through people subbing in as co-hosts and stuff in the past, and having you on, it definitely brings a lot of value to the conversation. So thank you for being a part of this, first of all.
Last thing that I kind of want to put out there is on this, what it takes to alter the matrix on a significant level is, in my opinion, is actually finding the agreement between large bodies of people and being able to offer them a system of participation that they that actually has tangible results. And for many years I've worked to try and instigate those and create those, and I can see, like in San Francisco, it's now a circus city. In part that's because of the work that I did. Burning Man, I was there at the very, very beginning, and I was there with the planners and the creators of it, and got to put in my intention, And I think that if you want to create, any kind of code that then becomes a carrier wave, it's about actually finding the people, the team that you want to work with, and then just meeting with them regularly. It's about that consistency. And you'll find the things that you care about, and you'll find the ways in which you overlap, and you'll begin to generate actual tangible ways of relating that have an effect in the world. And I just want to give a really strong call out to the people who are doing that on the West Coast through the festival culture, and really just acknowledge them for the work of refinement, because the structure that we're playing with now is something that's evolved over the past 20 years, and I've witnessed it from we're just going to get drugged up and dance really excessively and just go to an ecstatic state, to a very grounded ethic that's about where's our food, where's our quality, what is quality of life, and asking those questions in ways that go, well, these are some of the things that work. Let's promote them. Let's give people an experience of them, so that, the people who are coming to these festivals for the first time, or experiencing a hug on the street by a random stranger for the first time, will suddenly ask themselves, what can I do? How can I actually instigate it? And they may be the next people that we're following, in their intention and in their goals and in their things, the things that they're doing. So Paradigm Shift Radio being a part of that, and all of these different initiatives that you are choosing to cover is, I think, a very important part of what's going on. I would love to continue to participate.
Awesome, wonderful to hear, man. And shout out to the dogs in the background. They're welcome on the air anytime too. So, cool. Well, we only got, boys and girls, we only got about 8 minutes left in the show, unfortunately, but the good news is that we will be doing a video after party hangout this week. So Paradox, usually after the show, and for everybody else you're invited to, we'll do a Google Hangout. So there's a 10-person capacity cap on that. So you'll find a link for that at facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio. And of course, check that out if you have not yet. And the next thing is that we can do a draw for the buttons. I'm just worried about time running out, to be honest. But if anybody wants to submit an entry to get the free shift buttons this week, and that's something we haven't even touched about, the shift buttons, they're the buttons with imagery, consciousness shifting imagery on them, and they are great tools to use to perform acts of social alchemy and shiftivism. The shift buttons, again, you can give them to people. They connect people with the main website. It connects them to Paradigm Shift Radio. Very, 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 very effective tools for creating synchronicity and hacking the matrix. So check those out at facebook.com/ParadigmShiftButtons. But if you want to get in a draw for this week, actually, no, I apologize. I'm going to make a draw right now, but I'm going to tell you guys, for next week, go to facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio and send a message to that and tell us that you want to be in the draw, and you'll be in the draw for next week. But this week's winners of the free shift buttons that we do here in the Paradigm Shift community, because it creates opportunities for awesome synchronicity, this week's winners are on behalf of the universe. Oh my goodness. This week's winner is Bill. So Bill won the shift buttons. Won the shift buttons for this week. I'll send him a message, and stay tuned for that, and definitely add shift buttons to your quest inventory. They add, each one adds +10 synchronicity. So yeah, potent stuff. The shirts, and another thing I got to mention, the Open Your Heart shirt, which adds +5 synchronicity. So, I mean, if you can combine those with buttons, then that will also, you can obtain that to your quest inventory by going to teespring.com/openyourheart, and I'll post a link for that, and I'll post it up on my Facebook. Add me at facebook.com/skullbabylon, and you'll find all the stuff that I just said. And yeah, other than that, I want to bring Alon back onto the air, and we only got 6 minutes on the clock. So Alon, I'm bringing you back on. I know you've been on mute, but you've been listening and enjoying the fire. But Alon, please, just anything that you want to share with all our internet friends.
Be yourself, and everything is going in the right direction. Really, just go after your heart. Listen to your heart always. And we will get into Skull Babylon's profile. Get into our page, which is facebook.com/GoLoveTrip. We will update about everything we do and we will do in Canada, and just be part of the shift, get inspired. And if you are in Canada, so send us a message, and we'll link up. And thank you, Skull Babylon. We love you so much.
Man, it was awesome. It was awesome meeting you guys today. And
it was an amazing day today. Seriously, so much synchronicity and alchemy, and everything was there. Everything. And
so familiar too. That's the beautiful part about it. Like seeing you for the first time in person, it's just it was already so familiar. Very, very cool. That's how it works. So, that's it, man. Like again, just planting that seed. Like this is just the idea of we're catching up with ourselves. Just to think about that, because we are like half of, not more than half, fractally, like we're existing into the future. We already are in the future, and we're catching up with ourselves. So be that intention, ride that wavelength, be the flow in the sense that you are riding the flow, but also creating the flow, so just think about that. So we only got 4 minutes left on the clock, and then definitely go support the boys at facebook.com/GoLoveTrip, and they'll set up links for you guys to be able to donate to support the trip, support the funding with that. And speaking of funding, of course, you can also support Paradigm Shift Radio at ParadigmShiftCentral.com/donate, or go to the Facebook page and donate through there. You'll see the link that goes to the community tip jar. And yeah, go on, go.
We will do weekly updates, about the Love Trip, each radio show.
All right, man. Yeah, we'll work on that, man. That'd be pretty cool. So you'll hear it here on Paradigm Shift Radio, updates about the Love Trip as the boys do their thing. So that's exciting, man. The boys and the girls, we're all doing our thing. It's awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So that's all the news for you guys. And let's end. We only got 3 minutes left. Paradox, work your magic. We got 3 minutes on the clock. I'll let you know when there's less than a minute, and we'll wrap up the show. And facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio for the after party. ParadigmShiftCentral.com. Tell your dog. So there you go, Paradox. It's all you, man. And Alon, thank you so much again, brother.
Just want to really acknowledge everybody on the show, and so grateful for the work that's happening in the world. Finding ourselves with that which receives all being gravity. I invite everyone who's listening to connect to these 4 elements that I use as the core tenet of the work that I do. They lay within each other. The first is gravity, the sentiment of finding the bottom of your body, the weight that's in you, what it's moving towards, which is that returning energy, that the source of all life, what Arthur Koestler refers to as gravity is love. And the sentiment is that each one of us has a deep gravity, as we were saying earlier. That deep gravity is that constant bass note that is the source of all things, that is the root that we press against to reach toward the sun. And it is our inspiration, and we can always return to the gravity that holds us. If we just allow yourself to drop to the ground, if you're able, or if not in your position, just really surrender to that which is holding us. And then the second attention out of the awareness of gravity is the breath and the expansion that rises from the ground, that expands from the center. And in that breath, in the breath that is held by the earth, that is held, that kind of is your conduit, the breath expanding and contracting. And then within the breath is held the pulse. And I invite everyone who's here to just feel somewhere in their body. I always find that if I focus on my fingertips, I can find the pulse in my body. And linking the pulse that's the breath, the pulse is within the breath. And then finally the nervous system that races 1,000 times within each breath and 100 times within each pulse. That is the feedback loop, that is the inner world to the outer world, all of your sensations. Those 4 attentions, if you can spend any time in those attentions, then what you're creating is a relationship to the natural forces that support you every day, unconsciously. And when we do it consciously, we bring ourselves to that awareness that is the unified being. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Paradox. We only got 10 seconds left in the show. Alon, bringing you back in. Join me in saying farewell to the internet. Thank you so much, internet. Farewell, internet. Playing the outro music.
Thank you so much. We love you.
See you in the hangout. We love you guys. There you go. And thank you, Paradox.
Okay.
All right. Cheers. One love. See you guys in the future.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. If you would like to connect with people where you are and continue the conversations further, then check out ParadigmShiftCentral.com/buttons to order your supply of shift buttons to share with people to help invite them to this global project while also helping make new friends and building local community where you are. Shift buttons are tools to hack the matrix and tap into the synchronistic nature of reality to accelerate our collective awakening. Enter the promo code PSR into your order to receive additional bonus buttons to your supply. Thank you again, and one love.